So welcome to week 9 of this particular course, Literature and Society. And here our interest is literature and religion, that there is a nexus between literature and religion. And this session investigates, therefore, the historical entanglement of literature and religion, focusing on the belief that creative genius is a form of divine mediation. That is creative writing, a deliberate use of rationality to write a story, or it is just an inspiration by a certain spirit, yeah, and all that. So we begin with Socrates, who posited in the Aeon that poets do not create through technical skill, but through divine frenzy or madness gifted by the gods. So in this particular unit, that's our focus. So what are our expected learning outcomes? Compare Socrates' divine frenzy with embittered spirit possession, explaining how both frameworks replace rational agency with a passive conduit for supernatural revelation, explaining how both frameworks replace all that. So to contrast Socratic technique or technical skill with embittered positive gifts, and finally assess memory and ancestral presence in matters the return and Farah's close sesame. So this is the picture of Socrates, who theorized a lot with regard to the nexus between spirit possession and creative writing. So Plato in Ion, not Plato, okay, Plato dialogue in Ion argues that, of course, we are citing Socrates from the works of Plato. So according to Socrates as cited by Plato, the artistic creation is not a product of technical mastery. That is not actually a deliberate use of reason to produce a work of art like a song, a poem, or a novel. Neither is it a product of rational knowledge. So according to Socrates, it's a form of divine madness or spirit possession. And he argues that, artists don't write from rational thought, but they write from inspiration by a certain spirit. So he comes up with 5 key points that summarize this argument. 1, lack of rational mastery. According to Socrates, poets often cannot explain the meaning of their own work or apply their skill to other subjects. And when they are asked to apply that skill to other subjects, artists do not exhibit that competence. And therefore, according to Socrates, it's because when this person is writing, there is another consciousness that takes over and it drives the writer, to do what they do. So if art were a science, according to Socrates, poets would be equally proficient in all forms of poetry. Instead, they usually excel in only one, suggesting they are moved by a power outside themselves. And some of them, if they are given maybe a lot of scientific work to do, they don't excel so much in even criticism, for example. It's very rare to find people like Achebe who are good in criticism and also in artistic creation. You'll find very many artists being unable, to be good critics, and therefore they may not be very good literary scholars as such. So the another tenet is the magnet analogy. Socrates likens divine inspiration to a magnet. That is the muse. The muse attracts the poet. Which is the first iron ring, who then attracts the rhapsode or the audience. So this divine chain transmits power from the gods through the artist without requiring a rational understanding. That the artist is able to attract a spirit which gives him or her the information to write. But they may not be very good in things that require a lot of rationality. So Socrates also talks about the artist as a vessel, that the poets are holy creatures who are not in their right minds when they compose. That when they are under inspiration, it's not them. There is a foreign or another spirit that takes control of them, and then they are able to write all that But once they leave that spell of inspiration, they are just ordinary people who are very empty, and they may not be able even to exhibit that particular ability, to write. So the God deliberately takes away the reason so that they may serve as ministers or mouthpieces for a divine voice. And that's why some poets are actually very prophetic. When they write their novels or their poems, they are able to prophesy. They are able to prophesy what may happen in the future. Um, Sometimes you look at a work like A Man of the People. When Achebe wrote this novel, it ends with a military coup. And actually, there was a military coup that happened, at the end, at the end of that year, the book was published. And some people have argued that A Man of the People was actually a very prophetic novel, that when artists write, they don't write from the rational consciousness, but they write from the unconscious and subconscious, that part which is associated with the religious endowments. And so artists and singers, or singers, artists and novelists, that basically, according to Socrates' theory, they are more spiritual than rational beings. It's a point of view. So we're not saying this is the absolute. It's a point of view. It's something that we should interrogate. But in this particular unit, we are saying that there's a nexus between literature and religion. Then there's the question of divine dispensation. And because the artist does not possess a systematic craft, their talent is viewed as divine dispensation. The beauty of the work is attributed to the deity, while the artist is merely the physical medium through which the work enters the world. So we are saying, Socrates is trying to argue that a literary writer is just like a prophet. He's just like a medium who is used by, the God. And then after that, he's left empty. It reminds me in 2019, when we met Ole Polet in Kisumu. And when teachers asked him whether he was a feminist, he actually got angry. And he could not answer, that question very coherently. And the people were surprised because this is the author of the book. But when he was asked a simple question like, to explain whether he's a feminist, it became very difficult for him. And he even lost temper. So that one is one of the examples you can give to show that actually Socrates has a point that when the artist is writing, there is another presence, another consciousness that takes charge of the artist, and um, and he writes under inspiration of another presence or another self. That's why he even forget sometimes they forget what they themselves wrote, and they don't write within those theoretical canons that most of us know. They are just inspired, and that inspiration enables him to move the work forward without that rational consciousness. But when the critic sits down, he's able to see this is feminism, this is dialogism, this is monologism, this is eco-criticism. So the critique operates using rational principles, but the artist does not, according to Socrates. Passive creativity. So the artist's role is portrayed as passive. True art happens when the human mind is bypassed, allowing the breath of the gods to dictate the melody and the verse. That inspiration, which is a spirit, takes over, to guide the writer. Is not necessarily about these other rational abilities. It's not about rationality, but it's about specific gifts that is endowed with. So this is how Socrates now categorized the spiritual endowments. One, prophetic madness, which he called Apollo. So this is the gift of foresight and divination. Yeah, that the artist had the ability to divine. Okay, of course, these are now the similar gifts. The similar gifts, the similarity between the similar endowments with art. One is prophetic madness. Yeah. And Socrates points to the priestess of Delphi, who, when mad, provided guidance and truth to the Greeks. That when this spirit now took charge over the priestess of Delphi, he would be inspired. He would be inspired to guide the nation under the influence of that spirit. But when that spirit went away, then he just became empty, a normal person who is empty. So this suggests that human reason alone is insufficient for reaching the highest truths. So according to Socrates, for us to achieve pure wisdom, real guidance, we need to tap into the spiritual. We need to tap into the spiritual. We need to tap into the spiritual. And this is the endowment that the artist has, that when he taps in the spiritual, he's able to come up with wisdom that can really guide society. Yeah. Then telastic or ritual madness, Dionysus. This form of inspiration provides healing and purification. And when individuals and families suffer from ancient guilt or ancestral curses, this divine madness triggers mystic rituals and prayers. That for people, for spiritual healers, they need guidance from the spiritual for them to guide society, give them right rituals for spiritual healing, telastic or ritual madness. Then the third one is poetic madness or the muses. So according to Socrates, the finest poetry is not a product of technical skill or artifice, but a soul possessed by the muses. That when somebody is possessed by this speech, they are able to produce very good works of art. So this inspiration awakens tender and virgin soul, stimulating it to glorify the deeds of the past. And I agree with the, Socrates to a certain extent, that for an artist to really produce very good work of art, he needs to get inspired to get the right lines for poetry and the novel. As a writer, I confess that when writing some of the passages of my novels, I have to get the right sentences that just flow like music. They have to flow like music. And the music does not just come by technical skill alone. You have to be inspired by something. And this is what Socrates calls poetic madness. So, what are the other tenets of possession? Now, when it comes to spirit possession, people like there are certain scholars who have really theorized the whole question of spirit possession. Because for us to understand this very well, we have to understand the whole concept of spirit possession. And one is ontological substitution. A core tenet of spirit possession is where a spirit supplants the primary self. The primary self is replaced. The primary self is replaced by another self for the duration in which that person is possessed. And sometimes even another personality, another voice and desires will appear. And this is what scholars such as Beatty 1970 and Emma Cohen 2008 talk about, that there's an element of ontological substitution. Another self will appear and replace the primary self, to replace the primary self of the author or the artist. And so he takes charge, and then the book is now written. The book is now written. And then you have pathological manifestation of neglect. Pathological manifestation of neglect. When a possession is involuntary and violent, BT interprets it as a sign of spiritual disharmony. So this often stems from neglect of ancestral rights or a breach of community taboos. That spirit possession is caused by something. It must be caused by maybe somebody neglecting the taboos, or something, or somebody breaking certain rules. And the symptoms will come through seizures or even a madness. So we are talking about spiritual possession, of course. Then externalization of the social crisis. BT argues that possession is often functions to externalize personal or communal problems. So by attributing misfortunes such as infertility or economic loss, the spirit to spirit possession, the community moves the problem from the realm of human failure to the realm of spiritual warfare, which can then be addressed through ritual. So we are trying to say that for somebody to attain this issue of spirit possession, it cannot just be normal. Maybe some taboos were broken, or there's something that affected this person to a level that the psyche gets affected. The psyche is fragmented or fractured by certain conditions of life, which exposes the individual to spiritual possession. So, spirit possession in Pharaoh's close sesame. So, in Pharaoh's close sesame, there's a man called Dirie. Dirie is one of the leaders in Somalia when the Italians attack. And the shock that happens when the Italians attack, they shoot the cattle, they cause havoc, they kill people. And Dirie has not actually prepared for this particular incursion. And so the shock that follows, takes the rear into what we can call a traumatic experience. And after the trauma that follows this, the rear starts hearing voices. He starts hearing the voices of his ancestors urging him to fight the Italians, to resist the Italians, and not give up. And the writer says that since that day, the rear started experiencing prophetic powers, being able to see hallucinations. He could even experience a case where his late wife Nadifa, visits him to tell him everything about what is happening in the community and in the family. Even when he goes to prison, in prison, Adirie, sees himself in company of his late wife Nadifa. The ghost of Nadifa will tell him about what is happening at home, and when he comes home, his children are shocked to realize that Dirie knows what happened at home while he was in prison. And from that time, Dirie becomes a prophet. And this prophecy, it comes because Dirie is possessed by a number of spirits. One of the spirits is the spirit of his late wife, Nadifa. Another spirit are the spirits of his ancestors, which he hears. They are actually talking. They are talking about how he should resist the Italians and how he should be strong, and they advise him through and through. And even by the end of the book, um, Dirie is inspired by a number of spirits to go and kill the general. Although the assassination of the general does not happen, but throughout the life of the character Dirie, we see spirit possession being very evident in his life. And that's why we are saying, when I read Close Sesame and then read The Return by Hisham Mata and Brian Chikwava's Haranoth, actually, I was able to understand that there is a nexus between literature and religion. Because in these works here, we see evidence of spirit possession. And there are several, tenets that show that, there is spirit possession in close sesame. One, we have the tenet of executive possession. Executive possession, according to Cohen, executive possession is where somebody exhibits the presence of a spirit in their lives, and they can come through seizures, through hallucinations, and other symptoms. And we see executive possession in the rear. In the rear. For example, madness here is not just a mental deficiency, but a source of clarity. The prime example is the rear's visionary dreams. He has a lot of visionary dreams and also hallucinations where he sees the ghost, the ghost of his wife, coming to him and talking to him during the day. And this ghost or this spirit, and in fact, at one time, Nadifa just tells the rear that I'm the source of your dreams and visions. So most of the visions that he sees is because of Nadifa, the late wife, and we see him being described as, so while Western medicine might label this behavior as obsessive compulsive, disorder, this is not so because this person, the rear, is able, the rear is able to talk to the wife, the ghost of the wife, and we see it throughout the novel. So it's not just an obsessive or a pathological disorder as brought out through psychology. No, it is very, very clear that this is the other spirits or other selves in the life of the rear that make him a seer. Then you have psychic numbing through religious detachment. So the rear's hyper-religiosity is viewed as a protective shield. So the rear's constant reliance on the beads of his rosary and his rhythmic recitation of the Quran as a mechanism is a mechanism to numb the psychological pain and all that. But this ritualistic possession by the divine prevents the total fragmentation of his ego under the weight of the generous tyranny. Of course, religion now assists the rear, to overcome or to navigate his existence throughout the dictatorial regime by Siad Barre. And much as the religion protects him that way, the prophetic ability also enables him to guide the family and the community, you know, to adhere to religious principles, to adhere to religious principles, to adhere to religious principles, um, to adhere to religious principles. Much as at the end, the religion does not enable him to overthrow the dictator, but it enables him to sustain his religious ideals and values, his religious ideals and values. And it's true also that isolation that is able to gain access to the spiritual, the fasting, the religious rituals that he does in the work enable him to adhere to religious principles. Then the other self is also a bridge to memory. So the manifestation of the Ria's deceased wife, Nadifa, serves as a vital anchor. Their conversations are not just mere hallucinations, but possession by the past. So she is possessed by the past. So by speaking to Nadifa's ghost, the Ria maintains a moral and domestic continuity. Yeah, that the present Somali state lacks. Yes. So it's the religion and it's the spirit of Nadifa and it's the spiritual that enables him to maintain his values, in the face of the current, in the first phase of the current moral degeneration in Somalia, moral degeneration in Somalia, and then infiltration of the oral reality. So the spirits of the community enter the real sensory world through sound. So the cassette tapes, that he keeps listening to, you know, enable him to maintain, the religion and the value. So in a state where the written word is censored, these recorded voices, represent oral reality, that successfully subvert the general's official propaganda. Agency against the malevolent other. So possession provides the catalyst for political action. Yeah, it is through the guidance of the spirits, that the Ria is able to inspire the resistance movement. So the Ria's eventual attempt to assassinate the dictator is the culmination of being possessed by the spirit of his nationalist namesake, Said Mohammed Abdul Hassan. Yeah. So it is that possession that the ancestors, the the first past leaders, they really come in and they speak to the Ria as spirits. The Ria is possessed by very many spirits if you just look at the novel keenly. So this spirit of resistance enables the frail old man to transcend physical limitations, proving that madness becomes the only rational response to an insane regime. Yeah. So basically, in the modernist literature, believing in spirits is madness. Anything, anything that um, basically anything that transgresses rational reality in modernist studies is madness. So spirit possession is classified as madness, and this madness is the only way the people of Somalia can survive in an insane regime of Siad Barre. Then spirit possession and extraordinary abilities in matters the return. So actually, when you look at Mbiti, what Mbiti says, Beatty argues that spirit possession is not necessarily something very negative. Look at Beatty 1970. Sometimes spirit possession enables people to be seers. Sometimes it also enables people to be wealthy. It has a positive side. Whereas in dissociation, DID is seen as something undesirable, something pathological, something negative. Spirit possession in the African sense basically is seen in the negative. And when you look at matters the return, when you look at matters the return, we discover that spirit possession enables matter, the major character, to have many positive aspects. Rather than viewing possession as debilitating, it is a subconscious rebellion that equips the post-colonial subject with heightened perception. So the nexus suggests that when conscious mind is suppressed by traumatic external realities such as dictatorship, the possessed state bridges the gap between the mundane and the prophetic. And so when you look at Isham Mata, Isham Mata writes the return, and it's about how the dictator affects his family. And so I want you now to read Isham Mata's The Return and apply Beatty's theory of spirit possession and see how spirit possession, gives Hisham certain advantages. So write an essay on the merit of spirit possession with the reference to Mata's The Return and make a presentation to the class. So this is an assignment you need to do so that you have a term paper and also a presentation. You apply the tenets we have discussed in the previous slides to matters the return. Because according to BT, spirit possession is not necessarily negative. Sometimes spirit possession has very many positive effects. For example, in the closed sesame, Deria is very wealthy. Deria is respected as a leader, and Deria is also a seer, is able to foretell the future and reveal mysteries that many people in the community do not know because of spirit possession. So apply the same to matters the return. Thank you for listening. I wish you well.